Hey guys, welcome back to Hawk Talk. So today I'm going to be taking a deep dive into the Seahawks Week 3 analysis, Seahawks versus Vikings at Minnesota. So the final score in this game was unfortunately 30-17, with the Seahawks losing for a second week in a row. This game was actually really disappointing to watch for me, especially because the Seahawks defense basically was non-existent against the Vikings offense. It was really hard to watch Trey Flowers and DJ Reed get cooked by Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, and uh, you know I think the Conklin, the tight end for the Vikings, also had 70 yards or something. So it was definitely a really hard game for the defensive side, and we only got one sack, which I think was probably the reason for most of this. But so moving on to the game stats, we'll come back to the analysis later. But for the Seahawks side, Russell Wilson was 23 for 32, 298 yards and a touchdown with no interceptions. I think this is a really good stat line for Russ, because he was completing most of his passes, as you could tell, and he actually had a lot of yards through the air and a touchdown with no interceptions. I think there was one interception that they got called was an interception, so that was pretty lucky for stat-wise for Russell Wilson. So for Chris Carson, he had 12 carries for 80 yards, and he averaged 6.7 yards a carry and had a touchdown. He had a monstrous game. He didn't have too many touches, but when he did, he was always getting a lot of yards. So I think if the Seahawks could have utilized him better in the run game, they might have been able to win this game. But the backup, Alex Collins, had 2 carries for 8 yards, 4 yards a carry. Russell Wilson took off 3 times. He had 7 yards. And Freddie Swain had, I think it was like a jet sweep for 11 yards. Receiving, DK Metcalf finally has a big day for the first time this season. I mean, he's been having good days for the first 2 weeks, but this one kind of broke big for him. He had 6 receptions for 107 yards and 17.8 yards average, and to go along with the touchdown. So just like I just said, this was a really good game for DK. Hopefully we can see this more, and implementing Tyler Lockett, and that could just be extremely deadly. Gerald Everett also had a big game for 54 yards, 10.8 yards per catch, and 5 receptions. And Travis Homer actually got utilized a little bit in the passing game. I think most of the yards that he had came for the final play before half, where he got 20 yards or something, because the Vikings defense was just playing prevent. So he had 48 yards, 16 yards a carry. Will Dissly had one big catch for 39 yards, but that was pretty much it. And Tyler Lockett had 4 receptions for 31 yards and 7.8 yards a catch. Something that I noticed was that Freddie Swain only had 1 reception for 10 yards, compared to against the Titans. He had a big game. So I think the Vikings did a good job holding him in check. Defensively, Jamal Adams had 10 tackles, which is really good. He had 10 tackles, 2 assists. Trey Flowers had 7 tackles from his cornerback spot. Jordan Brooks and Ugo Amadi had 5. Bobby Wagner had 4. Darrell Taylor also had 4. And then Quandre Diggs, Alton Robinson, and DJ Reed had 3. And it just went to 2s and 1s. But Darrell Taylor was the one who had the strip sack for a fumble, but unfortunately it wasn't recovered by the Seahawks. The Vikings offensive line did a good job holding Carlos Dunlap in check, and pretty much the entire Seahawks defensive line, but I think especially Carlos Dunlap, which is really good considering that they were able to move the ball flawlessly on offense. So Kirk Cousins, going on to the Vikings side, Kirk Cousins had an amazing game, 30 for 38 yards, 30 for 38 completions, 323 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This is amazing numbers. Alexander Madison, the backup, actually had 26 carries, 112 yards, and averaged 4.3 yards a carry. And Amir Abdullah, the backup for the backup, had 5 carries, 24 yards, and 4.8 yards a carry. This is really sad to see if you're the Seahawks defense, because Dalvin Cook was out for this game, and still Alexander Madison put up over 100 yards. So you just wonder what would have happened if Dalvin Cook was in. Justin Jefferson had 9 receptions for 118 yards, 13.1 yards per catch, and a touchdown. Tyler Conklin, the tight end that I was talking about a little bit ago, had 70 yards on 7 catches and a touchdown. Alexander Madison also got utilized in the pass game for 59 yards off of 6 catches and 9.8 yards average. Adam Thielen also had a touchdown, which was a really good catch. It was a catch in traffic, but he had 50 yards, 6 receptions, 8.3 per carry, and 8.3 per catch. Sorry. And KJ Osborne finally had 26 yards off of 2 receptions. Defensively, no one had above 6 tackles, but Eric Kendricks and Harrison Smith both led the team with 6 tackles. And then Brashard Breeland, I think he's the cornerback, who had 5 tackles. And then Nick Vigil and Daniil Hunter. Nick Vigil had 4, and then it just goes Daniil Hunter with 2 and then 1s. This was just a dominant performance by the Vikings offense, I would say. The Seahawks defense kind of showed signs of the 2020 defense for the first couple weeks of the season, where no matter what they did, they just weren't able to stop the Vikings offense. And I think that's the reason we lost the game, actually. But it's really sad to see if you're the Seahawks defense, because there was, in the first half, they actually did quite well, both offense and defense. They were in somewhat control of the game, but then as the game went later on, the Seahawks defense just lost control. And by the third quarter and then late fourth quarter, whatever the Vikings wanted, they probably would have gotten a first. They probably could have handed it off to the offensive lineman. He would have got 11 yards. I'm being completely honest, but it was just really disappointing by the Seahawks, and I think they know that too. So it'll be interesting to see what they do against San Fran, considering that George Kittle is questionable for the game. Moving on to the Seahawks offense, DK Metcalf kind of looked like what he did last season. I think it was the opening drive. It was just Russell Wilson to DK Metcalf over and over. And I wish we could have seen that for the rest of the game, but the Vikings defense kind of slowed DK down a little bit, and he had that really cool touchdown on the opening drive. Tyler Lockett kind of had a slow game compared to his first 2 games against the Colts and the Titans. So moving forward against San Fran, we hope to see both wide receivers get involved. Chris Carson, though, I think had an amazing day. He rushed for 6.7 yards a carry, which is really good. That is really, really good, actually. That's almost 7 yards a carry. I think if he can keep that up and the Seahawks can find a way to, convert on third downs, which was kind of hard for them, the offense is pretty much solid. It's more than solid. It's really good to go. So I think just some keys to watch for the next San Fran game is just to see how the Seahawks defense can perform against that offense, to see if Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo will start, which one I think it will be Jimmy Garoppolo, but maybe if the Seahawks defense shut down Jimmy G, Trey Lance might come in for a few snaps. So it could be interesting to watch. Bobby Wagner against the Titans had a huge game, and he had kind of a slower game against the Vikings. So I think the entire defensive side of the football for the Seahawks is something to watch. And the Seahawks pass game is also another key to watch, to see if they can move the ball forward effectively. So other than that, that's pretty much it for today's video. And it's kind of short and it's pretty late, but we've been pretty busy, all of us, for the past week or so. So the game preview will be coming out soon with, I think, Nikhil and Santosh, or Nikhil and Abhi, or I might be there too. But so yeah, just stay tuned for that. That's all for today's video. Go Hawks, and let's see what they can do against San Fran.